With the release of the late great Jimmy Buffett's final album, Equal Strain on All Parts, I thought this would be a good opportunity to look back at his expansive discography and celebrate the music he left for us forever. Even though there will never be another Jimmy Buffett concert, which makes me really, really sad. And there was nothing like a Jimmy Buffett concert. We can still keep this party going. As a content creator and a lifelong parrot head, one of the ways I wanted to make sure we don't stop the carnival is to share my opinions and stories, in hopes that it encourages other parrot heads to share their opinions and stories. I also hope this lengthy exercise encourages those who are just getting into Buffett's music, or longtime listeners who let some of the gems go under their radar, to listen to these great albums and songs you've never heard before. Jimmy Buffett has been a major creative inspiration on me, and one of the things that my channel sets out to do is spread the love, magic, and discovery of music. So I feel this is a simple gesture to pay him back for all the years of inspiration and joy his music has brought me. As you can tell from this intro, I haven't taken the passing of Jimmy Buffett very lightly, to say the least. So, for a good portion of this video, I'll be speaking very highly of Buffett's music. If you don't particularly like his music, I welcome you to continue watching. Maybe you'll find something you like and change your mind. With that said, as much as I love Jimmy Buffett, this tier list does go down to a D. So there will be times when I'm a bit critical of some of his releases. In fact, some of you might even find my conclusions to be a bit nitpicky, and will tell me to get a license to chill and just enjoy it for what it is. If you think I ranked something too high or low, please share your thoughts. Despite having listened to most of these albums countless times over the course of many, many years, I'm still happy to reconsider my opinion. This isn't a definitive or objective ranking, but rather just one person's opinion who wants to share the great music with other people and discuss it in the comments section. The reason I'm doing a tier list is not necessarily to label his albums a certain way, but I'm using this as more of a device to talk about some fun facts and also what's so great about his music. While I'll be doing some visual editing, a good portion of the audio is going to be off the cuff, which is a bit unusual for this channel, so I appreciate any of my regular viewers for adapting to this video's different structure. There's a lot to go through, so to streamline things, I'll talk about what some of the rankings represent to me as I add the albums to their respective tiers. A link to the tier list is in the description, so if you want to use the tiers differently and share where you place these albums, please do. Tier lists are straightforward, a simple A to D structure. A lot of these lists have an F tier. I'm not going to give a Jimmy Buffett album an F, since I think that each album has at least one good song. To me, a true F album is an album with no good songs. But I've inserted an F ranking in the link for those who want to participate and if they feel any of his albums deserve an F. Lastly, think of the S tier as standing for special and super. Okay.
So without any further introductions, here we go.
All right, cheers. I have tequila on the rocks and Modelo. All right, we're gonna get off to a little bit of a bumpy start. Down to Earth as well as High Cumberland Jubilee were both released through Barnaby Records, who has since re-released a lot of these together in different compilations. Before the Salt, Before the Beach, just to name a few. And as a result, these two albums are kind of interchangeable. When you look at the discography for Meet Me in Margaritaville, the Ultimate Collection, these two albums don't even appear in the discography. His third album, A White Sport Coat and a Pink Crustacean, appears as the first album. So some will contest that these are even real Jimmy Buffett albums. I don't agree. I feel like there are some good songs on here, but Jimmy never played these songs live. There is a few exceptions to them really entering the Buffett zeitgeist. He re-recorded The Captain and the Kid In the Shelter and Livingston's Gone to Texas, which made it to other albums where fans are more familiar with. But essentially, songs off of these two albums are virtually forgotten and they sound alike. I'd say the only two exceptions are the opening tracks for each of these albums. So Down to Earth opens with a song called The Christian, with a question mark at the end. And I was very curious the first time I heard this song what the deal was with that question mark. And if you listen to it, you'll quickly understand. And it's a really early sign of his sense of humor that made him such a fun storyteller. And Ace is kind of a reworking of LSD from the first album, but without the unnecessary drug reference, and it's just much more well written. I really like the song Ace. I try and sneak it on Buffett's playlist, even though anything from these two albums stick out like a sore thumb. But even still, it's not like they're bad songs. It's just the style, which is very folky. He leans really into the Gordon Lightfoot stuff, which was a big inspiration. I know he did a couple of demos and he recorded some Gordon Lightfoot covers. It's a completely different style of music to what we associate with Jimmy Buffett, just because they've been re-released together so many times and they sound so much alike. I'm going to rank these two together, actually. And because they're not terrible songs or anything like that, I'm going to give this a C. So we'll do a C for both Down to Earth and High Cumberland Jubilee. All right, now that I got the awkward, bumpy start out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the ones that everyone wants to talk about. So if you're thinking about discovering Jimmy Buffett music and want to try it chronologically, I would start with a white sport coat and a pink crustacean. This is where the magic begins, and he starts off incredibly strong. One of the things that I'm taking into consideration with these albums and ranking them is I want to stay away from just, oh, this album is something that I can handpick and everything will be a good song. Something that's going to be really important to me, at least, is basically the flow of the album. Does it start off well? Does it keep a good pace? And does it end on a good note as well? And one of the successful recipes, a formula that worked really well for Buffett, was to start off with an upbeat song and end with a ballad, which this album does. And does one song complement another going into it? Does it have a good track order? That's going to be important when differentiating something that's an S tier versus even something like an A tier. A tier might be something that has a lot of good songs, but does the album have a good flow? A white sport coat and a pink crustacean, I mean, it does. It just hits the ground running with the Great Filling Station hold up and ends on a very sweet note with Death of an Unpopular Poet. Some of the essentials that appear on here, obviously Why Don't We Get Drunk, Grapefruit Juicy Fruit, but also some of the best songs of Buffett's repertoire, specifically He Went to Paris and Death of an Unpopular Poet, both of which I think Bob Dylan endorsed. So that's kind of cool. But just looking at everything, like, it just moves smoothly one song into another. From start to finish is an excellent album. There is no bad song. If I did have to rank the weakest song, I would say it's My Lovely Lady, but by no means is it a bad song. In fact, My Lovely Lady, I think, has one of the unique qualities of being the one of, if not the only song Buffett wrote about his first wife, which is kind of cool. So to me, this is an easy S. Possibly my favorite album of Jimmy's, if not, then top 3. So a quick story about a white sport coat and a pink crustacean. I was first introduced to Jimmy Buffett in the car. My parents were listening to the cassette of Songs You Know by Heart, and I just became obsessed with that album. I listened to it so many times. We still have the cassette, but I don't think it plays anymore. I just wore it out. Anyway, I wanted to expand my Jimmy Buffett knowledge past that album, and I discovered a record collection that my dad had. There was a ton of Jimmy Buffett albums in there. Living and Dying in 3/4 Time, Changes in Latitudes, Son of a Sailor, You Had to Be There, Volcano. But looking through Jimmy's discography, I noticed one omission, which was a white sport coat and a pink crustacean. This is when I was a really little kid. So for Easter, I was asked, if you could get one gift from the Easter Bunny, what would it be? And I said, I'd like a white sport coat and a pink crustacean. And the response was, you only get one gift. Luckily, the Easter Bunny knew what I was talking about, and that Easter, sure enough, with all the Easter candy in my Easter basket, there was a little cassette of none other than a white sport coat and a pink crustacean. So, thought I would share that fun little story. Okay, so here's where we might get into a little bit of controversy with some of my fellow parrot heads. So, Living and Dying in Three-Quarter Time. Overall, great album. Pretty much every song is excellent. You have the essentials, Come Monday, Pencil Thin Mustache. And then you also have some deep cuts that are just absolute gems, you know. Yeah, Ringling Ringling, West Nashville Grand Ballroom Gown, The Wino and I Know. All great songs. My personal favorite is Brahma Fear. Great song. I'm also a big fan of God's Own Drunk. Unfortunately, it's a pretty divisive song among Buffett fans, and I can understand why. What the f***? Well, this is off to a bumpy start. Okay. Anyway, why? Stop. Pretty divisive song. And I can understand why, even though I love it. On top of that, a white sport coat and a pink crustacean, like, it felt like, you know, it was an album about living in Key West. Even if you've never been to Key West, just the way Buffett wrote the songs, just the lyrics, he's such a great storyteller. It's just like you're there. I don't get that as much with Living and Dying in Three-Quarter Time, not because the lyrics aren't any better or worse, but mainly because he's kind of all over the place. You know, he's in Montana, he's in New Orleans, he's in Texas, and I think he even tries to, you know, continue with some of the Key West theme, and it doesn't have like a traveler's feel to it either, so it doesn't really feel like, oh, it makes sense that he's all over the place. It's just these songs in some ways, unfortunately, sound kind of randomly thrown together. It doesn't make them any bad songs. I don't necessarily think there are any bad songs on here. If I had to pick a weak song, even though I recognize that God's Own Drunk is divisive, I still love it, so I would give the weakest song to probably Saxophones. Also a good song, but this version's very underproduced. That song needs a horn section, and it just isn't here, so it's kind of weird why they even bothered to include it. I mean, I'm sure they included it because it's a good song, but it's just, it feels almost like a demo. Yeah, this is going to get an A, unfortunately. Feel free to dislike this. An A1A. Okay, yeah, another controversial one. So, for those of you who have been fans for decades, you might remember the website Church of Buffett Orthodox, or cabo.org. And that was a website that basically thought that anything made before Changes in Latitudes was a masterpiece, and anything afterwards was not, and Changes in Latitudes itself was kind of in between. I don't agree. Jimmy doesn't agree. I remember Jimmy saying something about cabo.org and him not agreeing with their thinking that he's only made stuff from 1976 and earlier that were worth listening to. One of the albums that cabo.org I think ranked the highest was A1A. And unfortunately, I don't agree with that either. I think it's an excellent album. Just looking at it, all the songs are great. I mean, God's Own Drunk from Living and Dying, that was a bit divisive. And that comes from someone that likes the song. But here, there's really nothing divisive about this album. The problem that I have with A1A is that it's so bottom heavy. It's just all the good songs are in the second half. it makes for a very lopsided listen. Again, we're looking at not necessarily picking songs out that are just excellent. We want to think about it from start to finish. Is this overall just a terrific listen from beginning to end? And it's not like songs like Making Music for Money is bad or anything like that, but the real Jimmy Buffett songs, the ones that are at his songwriting at its strongest, is starts right around Life Is Just a Tire Swing until the end. Just these are all just home runs, each and every one of them. Stories We Can Tell and Back, not so much. So like all of these right here, just Buffett essentials, all of these. Just a special shout out to my personal favorites, A Pirate Looks at 40, as well as Tin Cup Chalice. Always love these songs, but all of these songs are great. The ones before, I mean, aside from Door Number 3 and Stories We Could Tell, these songs are covers. And it almost just feels like Jimmy had maybe 6 or 7 really good songs and they wanted to cut an album, so they kind of just threw in these covers. It feels like such filler, despite them being good songs. So I can't bring myself to give this an S, unfortunately. I'm gonna give it an A because every song on here is good. In fact, I'm not gonna pick a weakest song either. It's overall just an excellent album. Okay, so I'm putting Rancho Deluxe on here mainly because my introduction to Jimmy's discography was looking at the Boats, Beaches, Bars, and Ballad Handbook, the Parrot Head Handbook, and Rancho Deluxe was featured in here. I guess sometime in the 70s, I would assume. The soundtrack became out of print. And when I was looking at the discography in the handbook, I didn't realize this was a soundtrack. So for many years, when I was a kid in the 90s, this would be just like this big mystery. I always looked for it under the Jimmy Buffett section in the music store, and it was never there. So when I finally got around to listening to it, it was a very fun listen. It was short, so it has a slight advantage over some of the longer albums. It doesn't have enough songs to potentially, lower its ranking. And listening to it in the context of the movie also works. It sets a great tone for the movie. A lot of people love the movie. I've tried to watch it a couple of times. It's just not for me. And I love Jeff Bridges. I'm a big Lebowski fan. I'm a big Lebowski fan and everything. And being a big Lebowski fan and a Jimmy Buffett fan, you'd think I'd be a big fan of the movie Rancho Deluxe, but it's not for me. But the soundtrack, it's unique in the sense that it has very early versions of Livingston Saturday Night and Wonder Why We Ever Go Home. So, that could pique someone's curiosity to listen to it. I like the title track, but one of my favorites, I try to sneak this into Buffett playlists as well, is a song called Countin' the Cows Every Day. Just a really great song. It's a shame that it's gotten buried in this soundtrack. So I'm going to give this a B. It's a pretty fun listen. All right, Havana Day Dreamin'. Havana Day Dreamin' is the only album from 1973 to 1979 that does not have a song featured on Songs You Know by Heart. It got rejected. I'm not sure how. I mean, you'd think the title track in and of itself is a pretty big Buffett essential. I'd say a lot of people who have explored outside of Songs You Know by Heart probably know the song Havana Day Dreamin'. But there's a lot of great songs on here. Opens up with Woman Going Crazy on Caroline Street, which is just a very Key West song. And then My Head Hurts, My Feet Stink, and I Don't Love Jesus. Just a very Jimmy Buffett song. A song called Big Rig, I would say that's probably the deepest cut, maybe. That's written by Greg Fingers Taylor. But this is where Jimmy actually, he doesn't necessarily need to be the writer of the songs in order to record an excellent song. So his rendition of Jesse Winchester's Defying Gravity, as well as Steve Goodman's This Hotel Room, makes this album such a great listen. I'm not going to pick a favorite, but I would like to give a shout out to some very neglected Jimmy Buffett songs. Clichés, Something So Feminine About a Mandolin, and Kick It in Second Wind. Like, all of these are just great songs. They're so Jimmy Buffett. I don't know why he never played these songs live. Just a fun listen from start to finish. Great sound, very consistent. One song moves smoothly into another. There's no awkwardness or anything like that. I'm going to give this an S. Definitely. Okay, changes in latitudes. So this is so let's just start with, okay, like the essentials. Margaritaville, Changes in Latitudes, both of his most popular songs for a reason. Every other song on here I like a lot. In the Shelter, the re-recording of In the Shelter is really good as well. His take, again, he does a Jesse Winchester cover, which is Biloxi, does a terrific job. And Steve Goodman's Banana Republics, awesome. The track order. After listening to You Had to Be There and some of the bootlegs from the 70s and early 80s, I don't know what they were thinking when they decided to follow Wonder Why We Ever Go Home with Banana Republics as opposed to Landfall. Like, Jimmy saw the two songs complementing each other so well that he played them back to back at almost every show for at least 5 years, if not more. And Lovely Cruise is like smack dab in the middle of the album, when the only spot for it is the last song of the album. I mean, it's like they took 10 great songs and shuffled them and then released them. The track order doesn't make sense to me. Luckily, the cassette has a very worthy track order where Landfall does follow Wonder Why We Ever Go Home, and Lovely Cruise is the last song. The cassette is actually the album that I grew up listening to. Our record player was broken. We did not have the money for a CD player, so we listened to cassettes. A good chunk of my Jimmy Buffett upbringing was on cassettes. So I'm going to give the track order a pass on this one, rule in favor of this album, and pretend that the cassette track list is the one that counts. So I'm going to give this an S as well, but with a little bit of an asterisk. All right, Son of a Sailor. I'm not quite sure what to do with this one. I think, so the essentials, Son of a Sailor, Cheeseburger in Paradise. The thing is the weakest song is easily Fool Button, but it was actually one of my favorites when I first heard this album. So listening to this album so many times has made me like this song less and less. So I don't want to hold it against the album. And all the other songs are great. Keith Sykes, who I think would join the Coral Reefer Band for at least a couple of albums, he wrote a couple of these songs. In fact, Jimmy covered these songs. These were already released a year before. Last Line and Costa Marseille. But all the other songs are great as well. So yeah, Cowboy in the Jungle, African Friend, Mañana. My personal fave is this version's of Livingston Saturday Night. Just a rockin' song, just so fun to listen to. I was in a Buffett tribute band. We played this song. It was very fun to play. So I'm going to give this one an S. I was kind of contemplating that maybe this should be an A with Fool Button, but I think, it's not necessarily the album's fault that I may have listened to it one too many times and a song or two got stale on me. So I'm not going to hold it against it. So we've been recording for a little longer than I wanted to already. So I'm going to streamline this a little bit. I'm going to breeze past You Had to Be There and Volcano, mainly because I already did analysis videos on both of these. So go ahead and check out those videos. I'll make sure to put a link in the description. But both of these are easy S's. I'm going to put this ahead of Changes in Latitudes, both of these. Yeah, You Had to Be There. Excellent live album. His best live album. So I don't really think I need to point out any sort of essentials or anything like that. I think the analysis video that I already made will do enough of that. Volcano, I do want to give a shout out to a few songs though. The Essentials, Finn's Volcano, of course. But there are also some really well written songs. Dreamsicle and Sending the Old Man Home. Really, really good songs. To me, my personal favorite is Boat Drinks. It might be one of my favorite Buffett songs of all time. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much of talking about why Boat Drinks is Buffett's unsuspectingly best song, but the vibe it gives out is this upbeat, fun in the sun type tempo. But if you listen to the lyrics, you can really hear the pessimism in life that makes Jimmy's music so essential. So, this song is about, it was written in Boston. And it was like, 20 degrees or something like that during the winter. And, he rhymes, I gotta go where it's warm with, I'm close to bodily harm. Like, a good chunk of life sucks. And we need Jimmy Buffett, and Boat Drinks is kind of that song where he brings out that tropical flavor in the music, but the lyrics are just so pessimistic that it works terrifically. Maybe I'll make a video doing an analysis on Boat Drinks and why it's unsuspectingly Buffett's best song. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, Coconut Telegraph. So Coconut Telegraph, again, I was in a Buffett tribute band. One of the band members grew up listening to Coconut Telegraph. It was an album that she and her family would listen to all the time. And so we'd play songs off of this album, some deep cuts, specifically The Good Fight, which I've always liked. So that was really fun to play. You have the essentials. Coconut Telegraph, The Weather Is Here, Wish You Were Beautiful, Growing Older But Not Up. Buffett was kind of, I think around this time he was kind of toying with, does he want to try and take like this big band step in his career, in the sense that, did he want to showcase his vocal ability? The Stars Fell on Alabama, it could be a bit boring, but I think it's an overall nice song, his rendition of it. That is. Little Miss Magic, just a sweet ballad to end on. This might be Buffett's shortest album. It doesn't feel rushed or anything like that. Oh, and Island. Yeah, just an overall great album. Again, like Son of a Sailor, I was thinking about, maybe I should give this an A, but I really have nothing to complain about. This is an excellent album. I'm going to give this an S as well. All right, Somewhere Over China. Somewhere Over China is possibly Buffett's most underrated album. And I can understand why people don't like it. They don't pay attention to it. Let's take a closer look at... Yeah, so there's not a whole lot of upbeat songs on here. There's a lot of slower songs. A lot of them are forgettable. I wouldn't say there's any essentials on here, unfortunately. So yeah, it really goes under the radar. But there's no bad song on here. I would say that On a Slow Boat to China is probably the most boring song on here. But I want to give a shout. There are a couple of really excellent songs. Again, two that I try to sneak into playlists. I Heard I Was in Town and If I Could Just Get It on Paper. So I highly recommend those. Okay, so I'm going to give this a B. All right, One Particular Harbor. So I would assume a lot of parrot heads are going to give this an S or an A. You got the essentials, One Particular Harbor, Brown Eyed Girl, We Are the People Our Parents Warned Us About. But then you also got a couple more of Buffett's best written songs, Distantly in Love and 12 Volt Man. 12 Volt Man being one of my favorites. But you have some songs that are... nothing ever came of them. So you have I Used to Have Money One Time and Living It Up. They're pretty good songs. They're not as big of a mystery as to why Buffett never paid much attention to them. Like, again, the songs from Havana Day Dreamin', I'm really curious about because I feel like those are just classics. With a couple of these, though, I can understand why nothing ever became of them. For me, the jury is still out on Stars on the Water and California Promises. Jimmy does a really good job with both of these songs, but they're both covers, and I don't know how good of songs I actually think they are. The reason I'm gonna give this a B is because Why You Wanna Hurt My Heart. That's probably the first song that we're talking about that I absolutely do not like. I mean, it's certainly the weakest song on the album, but other weak songs, it's not that they're bad songs, it's just they're not as good as the other ones. This is a bad song. Okay, so yeah, it brings the whole album down, unfortunately, for me. Luckily, there's a lot of good songs I can just cherry pick off of this album, but again, we're kind of going from just the actual journey of listening to the album in and of itself, which I'm the first to admit that was probably not Buffett's intention. He probably just threw a bunch of songs together and released them, didn't think much of it. So Riddles in the Sand. So I have a soft spot for Riddles in the Sand. My brother and I grew up listening to this album. When It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere came out, Buffett would joke that it was his third attempt at a country career. And I think Riddles in the Sand marks his second attempt at a country career, which did not last long. This album has such a unique sound to it. It breaks from everything else that we've talked about. It almost sticks out in his repertoire, similar to how Down to Earth and High Cumberland Jubilee do. But I think it's comprised of better songs. And so I do think more highly of Riddles in the Sand than I do Down to Earth and High Cumberland Jubilee. There are also a few Buffett essentials on this. Who's the Blonde Stranger, Ragtop Day, and Knees of My Heart. But everything else, it is a little interchangeable just because it's just such a unique sound. It's unusual for Jimmy Buffett to lean that hard into the country vibe, but it's not like they're bad songs. Like with Down to Earth and High Cumberland Jubilee, they weren't great songs, a lot of them. These songs on Riddles in the Sand, they're actually pretty good songs. It just doesn't really fit Jimmy Buffett. I think they're well recorded, and I think Buffett's voice fits. It just doesn't fit the rest of his discography, and so it just sticks out like a sore thumb. So I'm talking about songs like When the Wildlife Betrays Me, Bigger Than the Both of Us, Come to the Moon, She's Going Out of My Mind. Like, these are all great songs, but they're so unique. They're so not Jimmy Buffett. And it's great that he's trying new things, but I think he went a little too far in a different direction. One standout song is Love in Decline. That's another one that I like to sneak into mixes and stuff like that. So, yeah, highly recommend that one. I'm going to give this a B. All right, Last Mango in Paris. Okay, so there are several essentials on here. The title cut, Jolly Mon, Gypsies in the Palace, Frank and Lola. Yeah, these are great songs. Oh yeah, Desperation Samba, I would say, is another essential. So there are a lot of essentials on this album. A couple of my personal favorites off of here is Beyond the End and If the Phone Doesn't Ring, It's Me. Both songs take on a new meaning now that Jimmy's gone. So I think Beyond the End speaks for itself. But for me, If the Phone Doesn't Ring, It's Me. The first time I heard this song was actually while watching Live by the Bay, and I really liked this song. And you didn't have the internet to just look up what song appeared on which album. So when I finally found the studio version, that was a nice surprise to find it on Last Mango in Paris. But the last time he ever performed it, which was in Portland in 2010, I was at that show. Of course, we didn't know that was the last time he ever performed it, but it was kind of one of those full circle things. Please Bypass This Heart, it's okay. Everybody's on the Run and The Perfect Partner, they're not good songs. And it's a bigger sin to start the album off so weak. I'm kind of contemplating giving this a C, but just because it starts off with Everybody's on the Run. But because there's so many essentials on here, there's a couple of my personal favorites. I'm going to give this a B. It'll probably stay as a low B. Any other Bs that I bring on here will probably get pushed past this. All right. Songs you know by heart. So I know that some fans don't like to listen to this album because they've heard these songs too many times. But I want to recognize that without this album, I probably wouldn't have bothered exploring more. This was just a jumping off point for me, and I'm always going to respect this album because of it. It is an album that I recommend to people who don't know who Jimmy Buffett is. You need to like this album in order to like the rest of his stuff. I get it. He's written other things that someone who might not like Jimmy Buffett will like Death of an Unpopular Poet or something. But this just, it kind of captures everything. The length as well. I mean, they easily probably could have made an album of, 15 plus songs, but, they kept it under that. It's almost a gateway album, and it's not overkill. So I would say it properly selects the right songs to put on a greatest hits album from Jimmy Buffett, gives it a good track order, and doesn't overstay its welcome. And for many of us, it was the beginning of our Parrot Head journey. So I'm going to give this an S. Live by the Bay, I just had to include it. It's not as good as You Had to Be There, but I would say that this is an overall great album. A couple of interesting deep cuts like Door Number 3, and just the performances are excellent as well. I am a little bummed that it's a shortened version of the concerts. This was filmed over 2 nights in Miami. I kind of just wish that they just picked one night and filmed the entire thing, but I remember watching this for the first time and thinking it was pretty long as it was. So again, these official live releases that don't actually capture the entire Buffett concert, more or less, were kind of meant to act like something to intrigue someone to go see a Jimmy Buffett show. I'm still going to give this an S. Floridays. Not counting live releases and compilations, Buffett had just gotten finished with Riddles in the Sand and Last Mango in Paris. Last Mango kind of having similarities to Riddles in the Sand, kind of having a more country feel to it. Not as much. It's almost like he tried to backpedal a little bit. Floridays, however, is a full return to form. He's back in his trop rock style. I would say that this is probably his second most underrated album, next to Somewhere Over China. Just a lot of fun songs on here. I wouldn't say that there are any essentials on here, but still fun to listen to. I Love the Now, First Look. I have a few personal favorites off of here, specifically Nobody Speaks to the Captain No More and Floridays are really good. I also like If It All Falls Down. I would say one of the album's best known songs is Crayola, and I don't know why. I think it's overlong and boring, not particularly well written. So I think that drags the album down a little bit. And You'll Never Work in Dis Business Again. I don't know about this one. I don't think it's a good album closer by any means. He does rework it a little bit for a live version on Feeding Frenzy, but here, the album version and ending the album with it, I think it's a bad move. So I'm going to give this a B because there are a couple of songs I really like. I like this better than Last Mango in Paris, so I'm going to put this ahead of that. All right. Hot Water, Negative Nancy time. Hot Water is going to be our first D. Baby's Gone Shopping, My Barracuda, Pre-You. These songs are they're not particularly well written. Some of them are just straight up boring. And I know that some fans are going to say, well, what about Prince of Tides? What about That's What Living Is to Me? And even with those songs, there's like this awkward dialogue at the beginning. That's What Living Is to Me has this spoken introduction that's it's so outdated because he references the fabulous 80s. It doesn't act as a timestamp. It just dates the song. And Prince of Tides, his spoken introduction, as well as Save the Last Dance for Me outro, just doesn't work for me. His cover of Johnny Clegg's Greatheart is pretty good. I also like the kind of goofier, fun song. Yeah, Smart Woman in a Real Short Skirt is fun. And a couple of songs that have had to grow on me after a while are Homemade Music and Bring Back the Magic. But I don't know, I had to kind of push myself to listen through the album a couple of times before those two songs grew on me. So, yeah, this one gets a D. I feel like for Off to See the Lizard, it unfairly gets pulled in with Hot Water. That's not fair to me. I think much more highly of Off to See the Lizard. I have not read Jimmy Buffett's books, and it's my understanding that a lot of the lyrics in Off to See the Lizard reference some of his works that were published at the time. So a lot of the references go over my head, but even still, I find it a very enjoyable listen. Again, no real essentials off of here. I really like the album version of Pascagoula Run. For some reason, when he played it live, I didn't particularly care for it. And then the title cut's good. These songs are good, but a few of the ones that I absolutely love, Take Another Road, Why the Things We Do, and then last but definitely not least, this is probably up there with Boat Drinks and Tin Cup Chalice, but Changing Channels is one of my favorites as well. To be honest, I haven't brought myself to listen to this song since his passing. It strikes a chord with me. This song is really personal to me. And he makes a ton of references to a book character I have no idea about. So even if you haven't read his books, this is still an album worth listening to. The reason I would not rank it an A, That's My Story and I'm Sticking to It, kind of a boring song. Boomerang Love's grown on me, but again, I had to listen to it several times. Strange Bird and I Wish Lunch Could Last Forever are kind of boring. Same with Mermaid in the Night. So there are a couple of yawners, but no terrible songs on here. I see no reason not to give this a B. Put it ahead of Last Mango in Paris. Feeding Frenzy. Okay, so I kind of go back and forth with this. It opens with You'll Never Work in Dis Business Again. It's actually a fun opener. The live version's fun. By no means does it make it a great song, but it works. So I'll give the album credit for that. A couple of covers that Buffett never recorded, which appear on this album, are The City and Jamaica Farewell. The City is a song from Mac McAnally, who would later join the Coral Reefer Band, and Jamaica Farewell, of course, Harry Belafonte classic. Both of the originals, in my opinion, are excellent songs, but Buffett's live renditions are also really good. I feel like they make the album worth listening to. They are both the standout songs on the album, which is great that there's a few songs on here worth listening to, but it also kind of reduces the quality of the album when the two songs that don't appear on any other album are the highlights of that live album. I suppose his performance of Fins and Margaritaville are nice. Also, it has Honey Dew on here, which is also a good song. I like both the studio and live versions on here, so those are highlights. But I don't particularly care for a lot of the performances on this album. Come Monday, Volcano, A Pirate Looks at 40, Cheeseburger. Same with Gypsies in the Palace. Don't particularly care for that performance either. Jolly Mon is a good performance as well. So it's kind of hit or miss. Some of these performances are good, some aren't. But we have to talk about today's message. It's 6.5 minutes of him talking about some incredibly dated subjects, only to segue into a surprise performance of Why Don't We Get Drunk? And I say surprise performance because it's actually titled A Love Song from a Different Point of View on the album. So it's to surprise people who are listening to the album for the first time that Why Don't We Get Drunk appears on here. I remember being surprised by it. I was happy to hear Why Don't We Get Drunk on here. I've never had anything against the song, and it's really fun listening to the crowd sing it. It does capture the fun fan participation in these live shows, but these live albums have such a limited length that I don't think it was worth spending 6.5 minutes building up towards it. Today's message really brings the album down, unfortunately. On top of which, the performances for a lot of standard songs are not that well done. So I'm going to give this a C. All right, boats, beaches, bars, and ballads. So, for anyone who is disagreeing that Songs You Know by Heart is the perfect length, and you're saying, oh no, Songs You Know by Heart needs to be way longer. I want to listen to Jimmy Buffett for hours upon hours. Well, Boats, Beaches, Bars, and Ballads is pretty much that version of Songs You Know by Heart. All 13 songs from Songs You Know by Heart appear on Boats, Beaches, Bars, and Ballads. We have a family reunion where we go out to the ocean, and Jimmy Buffett is the soundtrack for those 3 to 4 days we're out there. And so for many, many years, this box set would basically act as that reunion's soundtrack. I'm going to give this an S, definitely. All right, so we're at a very interesting point of Buffett's repertoire where he actually took some time off from recording. So Fruitcakes is the first album he recorded since Off to See the Lizard. There was about a 5-year gap, which at the time was the longest he had ever been. And even though I like Off to See the Lizard, that 5-year gap did absolute wonders for Jimmy. He came back and he just kind of rocked it with 3 albums in a row. I call these 3, Fruitcakes, Barometer Soup, and Banana Wind, I call these 3 the trilogy. Fruitcakes came out right when I was discovering Jimmy Buffett music. So this was the new album. This is what I thought of as Jimmy's new album when I first started listening to Jimmy Buffett. And my first impression, unfortunately, wasn't as good as it was the second time I listened to it. This is an album that I needed to give a couple of chances to. The main thing is there's a lot of talking at the beginning. It's same with Hot Water. I don't know what the deal is with needing to talk in these songs. So Jimmy opens with Everybody's Got a Cousin in Miami, and he starts off talking. And this is a 7-minute song. And the next song is Fruitcakes, and he starts off talking. And it's also a 7-minute song. So it was kind of a bumpy start the first time I had listened to this album. And in hindsight, I'm glad I gave it a chance, because I would say 2 of his best songs, certainly his best in the 90s era, are Lone Palm and Six String Music. I also really love his rendition of Grateful Dead's Uncle John's Band. This album overall is excellent, but 1, the first 2 songs could stand to be a little shorter. 2, they don't need to be right next to each other. And 3, they don't need to be smack dab at the beginning of the album. It shouldn't be a bumpy start like this. So as much as I would like to give this an S, it is an overall excellent album. I'm going to unfortunately have to give this an A. I would say the weakest song is probably She's Got You. I'm not quite sure what he was thinking when he was singing Only Tang Different, Only Tang New, but that's really the only weak song on there. Apocalypso it's a pretty good song. I would not end the album with it. I get why he did, ending the album with something that references the apocalypse, but Delaney Talks to Statues, that one deserves to end the album, just on a sweet ballad similar to Little Miss Magic with Coconut Telegraph. So there were some missteps in terms of track order and maybe some editing of the music. Quietly Making Noise, Love in the Library, all good stuff. Barometer Soup, the second of the trilogy. Barometer Soup, the title track, and Barefoot Children, just what an excellent start to the album. For the most part, this is an overall excellent album. Bank of Bad Habits, I've never been a fan of this song. Some people treat it like it's the 90s version of Cheeseburger in Paradise. For me, it's never worked for me. I'm not as sour on Diamond as Big as the Ritz as some people might be. I think it's kind of fun. But Blue Heaven Rendezvous and Ballad of Skip Wiley, those songs are just kind of so forgettable. They almost feel like filler. I don't think they need to be here. I think they kind of slow the pace of the album. But there's some great songs like The Night I Painted the Sky, Jimmy Dreams, of course, Laje Nome. And his version of Mexico is really fun. I don't know how I feel about his talking at the end of the song. But overall, overall, it's a good song. Clearly, obviously, a James Taylor cover. My personal favorite is Remittance Man. That's an absolute gem. I'm going to give this an A. It is mostly an excellent album. I would just say, I mean, the track order is good. So, I think the other three albums that I ranked as A were overall excellent albums, but I had more or less a problem with the track order. Here I don't. I just feel like maybe this album's a little too long for its own good. Maybe 2 songs too long, maybe. Banana Wind. Between Barometer Soup and the release of Banana Wind, Jimmy's seaplane got shot down flying over Jamaica. It was all over the news, and I think that really captured the mood of the album for the better. Maybe that near-death experience really kicked him into writing some good songs. From front to back, this is just an excellent album. The Essentials, Jamaica Mistake, Schoolboy Heart, great songs. But also, Only Time Will Tell. What a great starter that is. Bob Roberts Society Band, Overkill, Desdemona, the saxophone in Desdemona's building a rocket ship. It's just such a fun listen. Mental Floss and Cultural Infidel. They're all fun songs, and they're well written as well. My personal favorites are Happily Ever After and False Echoes. Very heartfelt songs. False Echoes is epic. A song about his dad, I believe, after he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So yeah, and for those of you who were fancy pants and had a CD player and were able to buy the CD, you also were rewarded with a hidden track, which is a Stephen Stills cover, Treetop Flyer, which kind of goes back to the Jamaica Mistake incident. So yeah, this is an S album. I am going to put this on. I'd say this is in my top 5 actually. So yeah. Yeah, that looks right. Just absolutely. I highly recommend Banana Wind. Definitely. Okay, so was it Christmas Island? I get why some people might not like it. It's been a Christmas essential for me since it first came out. Most of these are covers, but there are a couple that are originals. A Sailor's Christmas, I think, is a terrific song. It actually has a personal meaning to me. I wrote a short story about this song. It's more about me, not about the song. It's not an analysis on this song, but basically this song acts as a kind of plot device, if you will. Maybe I'll release it. Maybe I won't. I don't know. I have to iron it out. But anyway, this is absolutely my favorite song off the album. But also the other original is Merry Christmas, Alabama. I'm not sure if Buffett wrote the song, but he is, as far as I can tell, the only person he was the first person to record this song. So, but I mean, the songs he chooses to cover make sense. Christmas Island. He makes Happy Christmas work. Mele Kalikimaka, Run Rudolph. Oh yeah, Ho Ho and a Bottle of Rum is an original. It's so Jimmy Buffett. Jingle Bells, I get why people might cringe at it. I've heard it so many times. It's been a part of my Christmas playlist. I don't care. But I'll Be Home for Christmas is kind of a boring one. So I get that this is a little bit of an acquired taste. I love it though. I'm gonna give it an A. All right, Don't Stop the Carnival. So it's based off a novel that turned into an off-Broadway show that Buffett wrote the soundtrack for. I guess that's how it went. I'm trying not to cheat and use Google. The show didn't last. Does not surprise me. Some of the songs are catchy, but for the most part, they're almost unlistenable. A personal favorite of mine is Island Fever. I'm not sure how it works in the context of the play, but just as a standalone song, I absolutely love it. But that's really the only nice things I have to say about this album. I'm going to give this a D. Okay, so Beach House on the Moon. I don't particularly care for this album either. It's the one that has Math Sucks on it. None of these are essential. I guess the closest one would be I Will Play for Gumber. Yeah, it's just a bunch of overall bland songs. I'm not going to give this an F because it's not made up of a ton of terrible songs. I would say the only terrible song is Math Sucks, but everything else is just, it's a little bit flavorless. That's how I would describe it. So I'm going to give this a D. This might be one of my least favorites. Yeah, I think I like this less than Hot Water or Don't Stop the Carnival. Okay, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. So this is the last live album I'm going to put on this tier list. He had a bunch more that came out that was kind of just taken right from the soundboard and released. This one was actually, they took time to carefully edit it and stuff like that, similar with You Had to Be There and Feeding Frenzy. The thing about this album is that it has some very unique choices for song selection. So Buffett's previous live albums kind of picked the predictable songs. Like I would say Feeding Frenzy took songs from the Jimmy Jump Up tour from 1990 and kind of just released kind of the most predictable songs on there, with the exception of cutting out Changes in Latitudes. Similar with You Had to Be There, just the overall set list with You Had to Be There was excellent. The only weird cut was they cut out Cheeseburger in Paradise, which is honestly not all that missed. Same with Live by the Bay. They have everything on there that you'd think they'd want to put on here, but there's a lot of interesting creative choices with the track list that they made with this one. So they cut out A Pirate Looks at 40, Why Don't We Get Drunk? Again, Changes in Latitudes gets cut out again. In its place, instead of new songs, the only really new song at the time was Fruitcakes, and that was about 5 years old at that point. So we get an official, albeit still live, release of Southern Cross, which had become a concert staple at that point in his live shows. But we also get some older songs, like Pencil Thin Mustache was the first time it appeared on a live album since You Had to Be There. So that was over 20 years. And then first an official live release of Trying to Reason with Hurricane Season, as well as Tin Cup Chalice. We also get an interesting choice with Love and Luck, and then an official release or a live release of Brown Eyed Girl, which was regularly played at concerts but had been cut out from Live by the Bay. Just the song choices are really interesting. Yeah, nothing really stands out for the regular songs, unfortunately. They're there because people expect them to be there. Cheeseburger, Come Monday, Volcano, Fins, One Particular Harbor. Oh, and Buffett egregiously references the lost verse of Margaritaville. So even though it was already released on You Had to Be There. So yeah, overall good album. I'm going to give this an A. Far Side of the World. So Buffett had gone to Africa and had a big influence on his music. I mean, we have Blue Guitar, which is a cover of Peter Mayer's, who was also a Coral Reefer member. Yeah, it's a nice song. But Mademoiselle is kind of a boring song. Yeah, so there's a couple of songs that just, there are a few boring songs on here. USS Zoddy Coldsmobile, whatever that is. But there are also some really nice sounding songs. Savannah, Fare You Well. All the Ways I Want You, a Bruce Cockburn cover. Someday I Will, one of my favorites. Same with Far Side of the World and Tonight I Just Need My Guitar. Those three songs, just it's worth listening to this whole album just to get to those three. These three are excellent songs. I would also throw Savannah, Fare You Well up there. So yeah, this is an album with a couple of boring tracks, but ultimately there's some really, really good stuff here. So I'm going to give this a B. I'll put it ahead of Last Mango. All right, License to Chill. This is probably, if God's Own Drunk is the most divisive song amongst Parrot Heads, then License to Chill is the most divisive album. And even though I love God's Own Drunk, I do not like License to Chill. So this album basically attempts to capitalize on the duet that Buffett did with Alan Jackson. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. And so this album is just full of covers that are duets, and just the choices. I personally don't think that Jimmy meshes well with a lot of these artists. It worked okay with Alan Jackson, but I feel like it worked because it was a little bit of a surprise and it was a little different. But to just try and capitalize and redo that over and over again with similar sounding artists, Clint Black, Kenny Chesney, Toby Keith, George Strait, I never listened to these guys. And it just felt like this was being shoved down my throat. Now again, they were just having fun. They were trying to capitalize and give people more. It's 5 o'clock somewhere because everyone loved it so much. But no, the duets don't work for me. And just the style change. I never thought of Jimmy Buffett as country. When growing up, he was always played on rock stations. When going to the music store, there was the rock section, there was the country section. Jimmy Buffett was always in the rock section. I could see the crossover a little bit, especially with just the pedal steel guitar in his music and him coming from the South, him having that little twang in his accent. But overall, I never considered him country. I for the most part, don't like this album. There are a few fun songs on here, like Simply Complicated and Coastal Confessions. He does redo Guy Clark's Boats to Build with Alan Jackson pretty well. Window on the World is also a nice cover of John Hyatt's song. I loved the Grateful Dead's Scarlet Begonias, and I loved Leon Russell's Back to the Island, but Jimmy's renditions just don't do it for me. I'm going to give this album a D. I do like it a little more than Beach House. Take the Weather with You. So this was right around the time where he dropped most of his horn section. So like Amy Lee on the saxophone, that was a big miss in my opinion. His music was just going in a different direction. He was taking it more country. This is not as country leaning. I don't even think there are any duets on this album. Let's see. Yeah, no duets. With License to Chill, he's doing duets for all the wrong reasons. He's just taking turns singing a verse. It's not participatory. With It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere or any good duet, it feels like there kind of needs to be a reason that they're having a duet and not singing it alone. Even though I was afraid that Buffett would do more of those duets and do more of that License to Chill style, Take the Weather with You, he kind of steps off it a little bit, but he clearly does plan to stay in that country genre to some extent, which I don't particularly care for. Country music's not my thing, and I really honestly never thought of Buffett as a country musician. If you listen to some of his old interviews, he never talks about country music being a huge influence. He talks about a lot of New Orleans musicians and Gordon Lightfoot.
So it's like a gumbo kind of an influence on music. I'd listen to the radio from New Orleans would be Benny Spellman and Irma Thomas and heavy old great black New Orleans artists, which is real contrary to the way people think. They think if you come from Alabama, of course, you're listening to country music. Well, I didn't really like it very much in the beginning, and all my early influences were out of New Orleans. And then from there, when I first started playing in a folk club, so I had all this great old New Orleans black rock and roll input, and then I started playing folk music and listening to people like Gordon Lightfoot and Joni Mitchell, who I thought were great writers above everything else. So
Take the Weather with You does not lean too much into the country angle. The Crowded House cover, the title track, it's kind of interesting. It works. I don't really like Bama Breeze all that much. It's not written by Jimmy, but it's almost like someone wrote it on behalf of Jimmy. I don't care for it. Same with Party at the End of the World. No. Everybody's on the phone. It's fun. I don't want to be overly critical. Whoop-de-doo's boring. Nothing But a Breeze, another Jesse Winchester song. That works. I enjoy this song. Cinco de Mayo in Memphis, another Guy Clark cover. Don't care for it. But a personal favorite is Ragabilly Hill. Great song, as well as Wheel Inside the Wheel. and breathe in, breathe out, move on. I would say that might be one Buffett essential off of this album. And then ends on Henry Capoto's Dukes on Sunday, which I think is a strong closer. So yeah, overall I like this album. I'm gonna give it a B. Okay, Buffet Hotel. Yeah, this album is not good, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. Sorry, I'm being so negative. Yeah, I don't like Nobody from Nowhere. Wings is okay. Yeah, Summer School, kind of corny. Life Short, Call Now, Buffet Hotel, a lot to drink about. So dated. Yeah, similar with Beach House on the Moon. This album's just kind of blah. I would say, Wings is pretty much the only okay song, but it's by no means a great song. So maybe Beach House is not the lowest. Maybe this one is the lowest. All right. Songs from Saint Somewhere. All right. This album, don't mean to be such a hater. This one's a bit overlong as well. Something about a boat. Okay. But yeah, Einstein was no. Oh, no. No. Okay. Tides is good. No. So the final 3 songs on this album, I Wave Bye Bye, Color of the Sun, and Oldest Surfer on the Beach, are good songs. Specifically Color of the Sun, but I'd say all 3 are good. This album ends on a high note, so I'm going to give this a C. All right. 'Tis the Sea Sun. No. Yeah, so all of these songs are good, but what Jimmy does is he kind of, what I call Buffettizes some things, where it's almost like he's drunken karaokeing a lot of these songs on here. It's not the same as with Christmas Island, where he either took Christmas songs that were logical for his style to cover, or he actually tried to do his own rendition of it. He did kind of goof off with Up on the Housetop and Jingle Bells, but he did his own version of Happy Christmas and Run Run Rudolph and all of that. So here it's kind of just ugh. He's just kind of, doing a drunken karaoke Caribbean rock and roll style of Christmas classics. The duet with Nadira Shakur, Baby It's Cold Outside. This one gets a D. I'm going to rate this list for now. All right, so Life on the Flip Side. Here's the thing. So this was released in 2020, and Jimmy would have known about his cancer diagnosis at this point. The pandemic, we were just all in lockdown at this time. On top of which, I remember him saying that he didn't know if he was going to do another album again, because albums were just no longer relevant. People were just kind of dropping singles. The whole concept of an album may be outdated now with streaming music. The fact that he had all of that going on at the time this album was being produced, I kind of just wish, there was a little more heart in this album. It almost feels like they rushed to release this with a bunch of upbeat songs or relatable songs to capitalize on people being locked down and him not being able to tour, when I feel like there was just a huge missed opportunity to make this a far more personal album. I mean, Half Drunk, I listened to this again today. They all sound drunk. Not half drunk. It would have been nice to hear them half drunk. Maybe the song would have turned out better. I don't know. The Slow Lane, it's okay. It's one of those songs that might grow on me. Don't Care if We're Down at the La-Di-Da. Believe it or not, Cussin' Island is actually the fun song of the album that I enjoy. I thought I would like this song the least, but ironically, I like this one the most. So, yeah, this album gets a D. I'll put it here. All right. Songs you don't know by heart. During the pandemic, in place of having a Jimmy Buffett concert, because we were all in lockdown, Buffett released a tweet asking what songs everyone wanted to hear him play live that he never played live. And so a bunch of people wrote in several songs, myself included. I don't remember which songs I picked. Probably something like Remittance Man and 12 Volt Man or something like that. He ended up making an album out of it. And the song selection's good. And it was nice to see Jimmy revisit a lot of these old songs. The heart is there, but this was clearly like a social distancing album. I think everyone was in separate studios just sending their files to be mixed. Like if you listen to I Have Found Me a Home, this version, the original appears on a white sport coat and a pink crustacean. You listen to this version, the mixing just seems a bit off. The songs in and of itself and the spirit of this album are there, but just the execution just doesn't do it for me. Same with the videos. Delaney filmed with her dad performing these songs acoustically. You know, it was just for fun. I don't mean to be overly critical or anything like that, but a part of me feels more effort could have been put into a project like this. Specifically, I don't think Delaney necessarily did a lot of research prepping her dad for these interviews. Specifically, she mentioned something like, you only played the captain and the kids 7 times live. Or it was something like that. And Jimmy's kind of like, really? No, I must have played it more times than that. That's not right.
You've only ever played it 6 times.
What?
You've
Captain
only
and the
ever
Kid?
played that song 6 times in your whole career. Why?
Well, that's somebody's up there. No, I've played it a lot more than that.
No, it's 6 times. I have it here.
Where'd you get that from?
I have a sheet that says 6 times.
Oh, they got that from BuffettNews.com. It's not right all the time. No, that song, I had to play it because...
You haven't played it. You've only played it 6 times, and you've played Cowboy in the Jungle 98 times.
What had happened is that Delaney was just looking up on the internet just the set lists that have surfaced. It doesn't necessarily mean that was the only times he played the songs. I mean, there could be set lists out there with Captain and the Kid on them that may never surface. And so, you know, I just feel like she just quickly looked through the internet to, you know, find things for this project. And it just, something about it seems a little bit insincere. And Jimmy reading what I think was ultimate guitar tab for some of these songs instead of just referencing maybe some of his old notes, which might not exist anymore, or just playing it by ear. He just kind of reads through it. All of it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, to be honest with you. I get I'm being overly critical. This was just for fun. I don't know if they're supposedly doing this for the fans. I think there could have been more effort and dedication put into this. Despite me liking the idea that Buffett wanted to do this for his fans, just the poor research, the insincerity, and the strange mixing of the songs on these albums, I'm going to give this a D, unfortunately. All right. We're at the final album. I don't sigh from exhaustion. I sigh from sadness. This is probably going to be the last Jimmy Buffett album. I say probably because I'm not sure if anyone's actually labeled this the last Jimmy Buffett album, but if it's not, then I would assume they would release some back catalog of songs that were never released on an album, which doesn't excite me too much. The reason being is, being a Pink Floyd fan, when Roger Waters released the final cut, fellow Pink Floyd bandmate David Gilmour was not too excited about it because these were songs that Waters had written for The Wall, but they got cut out. And Gilmour's logic was, if they weren't good enough back when we released The Wall, why are they worthy enough now for the final cut? And sadly, I kind of have that outlook on any subsequent Jimmy Buffett releases. If they were really good songs, why are we hearing them after he's gone? With the exception of this album. So in many ways, if this is not the last Jimmy Buffett album, I would still consider it officially his last Jimmy Buffett album. And with that in mind, I had to wait till he passed away to know what I really wanted out of a final Jimmy Buffett album. I knew Jimmy wasn't going to live forever, so did I want his final album to be a collection of heartfelt ballads like Death of an Unpopular Poet or False Echoes? Or did I want his last album to assume it wasn't his last album? And I don't know how to read this album. Warren Zevon was very transparent that The Wind would be his final album. David Bowie, listening to that album, Black Star, things are a little more subtle, but you can hear the finality in it. With Equal Strain on All Parts, it feels like a mixture of those two things, plus just another Jimmy Buffett album. In terms of style, I liked this album a lot. It's very jazzy and bluegrassy. He steps away from the country style I already talked about not liking, but he also kind of moves away from some of that Caribbean rock and roll style that he's known for. So it is a very unique listen. Overall, it's an incredibly upbeat album for the most part. There are a few slow songs, obviously Bubbles Up, but a good chunk of it has a really happy vibe. And after listening to the album from start to finish, granted, I've heard a lot of these songs more than once. A few of them were pre-released, and I've listened to those several times. But I also listened to a few that were just released with the album. A couple of times just cherry-picked them out. But in terms of listening to this album from start to finish, I've only had the opportunity to do it once. And I think from front to back, it works really well. I was a little bit concerned at first with Mozambique being the final song on Jimmy Buffett's final album. It's a Bob Dylan cover. It was nice to see Emmylou Harris return to record the song again. She was part of the original Bob Dylan recording, and she came back and recorded it with Jimmy Buffett, which is kind of cool. But I didn't know how I felt, and honestly, I was a bit critical about this decision to put this song as the last song on the album. But hearing the album from start to finish, listening to Equal Strain on All Parts as a whole, and it ending with Mozambique, I think it works really well, actually. You know, I was critical at first because I would have liked the last song on the last Jimmy Buffett album to be incredibly personal, like Death of an Unpopular Poet or False Echoes. Instead, you get an upbeat song that's not even written by Jimmy Buffett. But many songs leading up to it are very reflective in the sense that he references pretty deliberately a lot of songs and things he did in the past. For example, in Close Calls, he mentions his fight with Buford Pusser. Both T-Punch Cafe and Portugal or PEI heavily reference previous Jimmy Buffett stories and songs. I even like the Luca Brasi Godfather reference in Fish Porn. Johnny's Rum, really nice song. University of Bourbon Street also summarizes a lot of Buffett history. I don't know if I should think of Bubbles Up as kind of a goodbye song or not. It's hard to say. Jimmy knew for around 4 years that he had cancer, but I'm not sure if he had the mindset that his days were numbered and that this would be his final album. In one of his, if not final interview for WLNG Radio, which took place in July 2023, about 6-7 weeks before he passed. He had mentioned wanting to go back out on the road in late August. So, yes, he may have been optimistic, but at the same time, he may not have thought about his diagnosis like that, like his days were numbered. He may have just thought, I'm going to take things one day at a time, hope for the best, make plans, and hope that they happen. So I don't quite know if Bubbles Up is really his goodbye song or not. The first time I heard it, it was very emotional. And it's a nice ballad, so I like that. But for the most part, there's a lot of great songs on here. My Gummy just kicked in. It's okay. It's not terrible like Math Sucks. I even like it better than Bank of Bad Habits and I Will Play for Gumbo. A couple of fun, popular songs from the 90s that fun novelty songs, but I don't particularly like. This song, it has a little more credibility because Paul McCartney's on the bass, and the lyrics are funny in my opinion, so it does work. I would say this is probably the weaker song on the album. Same with Fish Porn. I think Columbus, if I could be wrong, but this might be the same Columbus that he recorded a demo for Far Side of the World, and it got cut out. I'm not sure. I would check, but Jokal Ben, their servers are still down, so I can't double check, unfortunately. But going back to Mozambique, ending on it, it was almost like not just a curtain call for the album, but also his career. It was an upbeat, happy song about being by the beach. And I know that the real Mozambique is not quite like that, not quite as happy as a place as Bob Dylan had written about, and I think he did receive some criticism for that, but I think the spirit of the song really captures this album, which is a relatively happy album, as well as his entire career, which is a relatively happy career. I mean, I think you have to be a bit frustrated with the day-to-day life to actually like Jimmy Buffett. That's why you seek him out. But that's what he offers. He was the first to admit that. And so I think Mozambique rounds up a great album and a great career. With that in mind, Jimmy's final album, I need a little more time to know for sure that this placement is solid. But for today, I'm going to give this an A. This might be a high B, but for today, since I'm still excited about it, since I was very happy that this was a great album, I'm giving it an A. And I hope that it sticks. I don't want to hear it a bunch of times and then see all of these, issues with it. I try not to be overly critical like that, despite having ranked some of these albums as a D. But completing this tier list and stepping back now, the trend that I see is that for the most part, he had a pretty good career in the 70s and 80s, and even at least one album in the 90s in terms of S tier. 5 albums from the 90s, if you want to include the A tiers: Fruitcakes, Barometer Soup, Christmas Island, and Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. A good chunk of his 80s catalog and 2000s catalog finds itself in the B section. Basically, the 2010s are all D tier, which I hope demonstrates that I'm being truthful in ranking Equal Strain on All Parts. I have no problem criticizing some of Jimmy's later work. None of it an F, luckily. And then obviously the C tier is kind of random, the least used tier. But overall, just an excellent career. So what's next? So in October, Mac and Alley, regarding what the Coral Reefers would be up to now that Jimmy's gone. And one of the possibilities is for them to carry on. They don't quite know how they're going to do that, but there are some plans. So it sounds like they're thinking pretty hard about it and what the best way is to honor Jimmy's legacy, which is it's nice to know that they're carrying on in some form or another. I've heard some of their solo work. They're all very talented musicians. It's no wonder why Jimmy wanted to work with him. So I'm keeping an open mind in terms of what the next step is, if there is. The Grateful Dead, for example, things just didn't stop when Jerry Garcia died. They carried on with Dead and Company and all of that. So I know it's a little bit different since the Coral Reefer Band always backed up Jimmy Buffett, and now he's not there. So, but they might find ways to go about doing that. So I'm keeping an open mind. I'm staying excited about it, but at the very least, the next thing is to spread his music and the state of mind that connected all the Parrot Heads to him. I'm making this video because I feel like there's a lot of great songs that even a lot of Parrot Heads don't know about. But by no means am I done discovering the work of Jimmy Buffett. Like I said, I haven't even read any of his books. So I look forward to going through those, as well as some of his bootlegs. You know, I feel like I've heard a good chunk of his 90s bootlegs. I probably won't bring myself to listen to every single one of his bootlegs, but I would like to try and listen to at least one concert for every year that he toured. You know, so I have a lot of the 80s bootlegs to go through, maybe even some of the 2000s Radio Margaritaville broadcasts. So he left behind a lot of things to keep us busy, a lot more things to discover about him, a lot of excellent music to share with our friends and family and other loved ones, and to just spread that Jimmy Buffett state of mind. So with that said, and wanting to spread that state of mind, if you want me to cover more Jimmy Buffett content, please let me know in the comments below. And to ensure that algorithm reaches new potential Parrot Heads, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. That's it for today, but until next time, fins up. Thank you.